Alright, so remember how I told you about lifesteal items recently? Well, forget everything I told you because everything has changed now. Well, it's not quite as bad, but I've gotten a lot of questions regarding this topic as I just recently made the video, and I didn't feel like originally making a video about this again, but I think it might be necessary because of the changes that we've seen last patch. So, what exactly was changed? Soul Eater saw a nerf. Soul Eater no longer gives you extra lifesteal upon receiving stacks. And it also heals less per stack when the stacks are consumed at low health. Now it heals 1% instead of 1.5% per stack, meaning a maximum of 20% of your maximum health points. Sounds confusing? Alright, let's compare it to the old stats. The old stats, when you had full stacks, were 30% attack speed, 30% lifesteal, 10% movement speed, and a maximum of 30% of your health as a heal on low health. Now the stats are 30% attack speed, 20% lifesteal, 10% movement speed, and 20% HP at threshold. So you're effectively losing out on roughly 200 health and 10% lifesteal at max level and full stacks. Let's compare that to Asi. Asi's stats are unchanged compared to last patch, so they're quite simple. 20% attack speed, 10% less than Soul Eater, 15% lifesteal, 5% less than Soul Eater, and both of those numbers are not that significant. They make a slight difference, but not that much. The significant number here is 15 flat penetration, which really helps against squishy targets, especially early on in the game. And then there is the passive. Asi's passive brings you up to 40% lifesteal, which is now undoubtedly the highest value with no other item coming close in terms of maximum lifesteal, but only below 35% health. I've done some calculations on how much this translates into, and assuming we're fighting another squishy, another hunter, and you're hitting 2 shots, one of them being a crit and one of them not being a crit, you'll roughly deal 750 damage, a little less but roughly. 40% of that would be roughly 300 health points. So, assuming we're taking 2 shots after we're getting below 35% health, which is realistic if you're just shooting out in a 1v1 and everyone is hitting every single shot, then you would heal for 100 less than a fully stacked Soul Eater. Keep in mind though that the passive lasts longer than that. If you're able to get more shots in, then Asi all of a sudden becomes more effective in terms of how much health it gives you in total. It also helps greatly in specific situations as it isn't as situational as Soul Eater. You don't need the stacks, the passive will be up unless it came up recently, and you don't need to have stacks first for it to work. It will work like that every time, whereas Soul Eater is also at 300 HP if you only have 15 stacks. So overall, the boxing difference between Soul Eater and Asi will become a lot less, and it depends a lot more on hitting your shots late to see who's actually doing a better job and who will survive the battle, and not who bought the better item in the first place. This, in return, means that we're probably going to see a lot more of Asi, as it's just a generally better item in the meta, with ability hunters coming back and higher DPS being valued, and Asi just providing slightly higher DPS than Soul Eater. You also have to keep in mind that you're not always going to be boxing a hunter 1v1, and that you'll often have the chance to lifesteal more than 2 shots. Or you might get lucky with crits and get 2 crits in a row, and in that very moment, Asi is already out healing Soul Eater. So it's a bit of a gamble, but overall I would say Asi is probably the safer option, the more helpful option throughout most of the game, especially given that it's also roughly 200 gold cheaper. The Soul Eater nerf also means something else. It is no longer the highest sustained lifesteal item. This now goes back to a fully stacked Devourer's Gauntlet, which sits at 25% lifesteal at all times as soon as it's stacked. But it's not going to lose the stacks, so it keeps the value. It's kind of arguable if this will bring Devourer's Gauntlet back into the meta, and at this point I still doubt it. It does have nice lifesteal, and actually has the highest DPS out of the 3 against tankier targets, but it still makes for a relatively weak and slow early game. Requires you to get crutch items like Death Toll beforehand and still not have bully potential in lane early on. And you can hardly risk that with any hunters. I imagine some purely late game focused hunters could make use of this item now. But then again, in most situations, I would rather have RC. Last but not least, there's Bloodforge. With the change of Soul Eater, Bloodforge is actually in a bit of a better place. It is the highest power lifesteal item with 75 power. It has 15% lifesteal, which is still as much as RC and close to current Soul Eater. And it has the passive with a 400 health shield at level 20 and 10 movement speed. If this sounds familiar, just look at the stats of Soul Eater. The passives are really similar now. The situation where you get them is different. Soul Eater's passive activates automatically if you drop below a certain health threshold. With Bloodforge, it's quite the opposite. You actually have to kill someone to get the passive. This is usually counterproductive because it will not help you in a direct boxing match. And once again, you have to get the kill. An assist won't suffice. So overall, as a defensive item, Soul Eater stays a lot better. If you want to play really aggressive though, I could imagine Bloodforge actually seeing some play. I think due to the price tag, you will not see this item early game. It is the most expensive lifesteal item with 2,850 gold and it delays your power spike by a lot. What I could imagine working is maximizing your DPS late game by trading out an RC for a Bloodforge. This especially helps against heavier, tankier teams. I would still consider it a niche option compared to the more accessible, cheaper, and overall great RC. But if the match goes on long enough and you feel like the aggression could be helpful and you want to chase those kills, maybe in combination with the Wind Demon, then why not? This is obviously specifically talking for hunters. As pointed out in the last video about this topic, I don't think that Bloodforge is that great for ability characters because they don't make use of lifesteal as it doesn't proc on abilities. There are certain niche guards, like hybrid guards, that can make good use of it, but it's still not a mass item in my opinion, and it's slightly overvalued by many. Especially with the situation we have now, we can actually say that all lifesteal items have a certain amount of viability, much different from before when Soul Eater was just straight up superior in every situation. If you want to maximize your lifesteal throughout the game, Devos is an option. It is probably the least picked up still because it's still very weak compared to the others, but it's definitely better. Then we have Bloodforge, which remains situational and is mostly not that good for hunters and it's very expensive, but it has its uses in an aggressive playstyle. Then we have RC, which is probably your go-to item as a hunter in most situations now, as it provides you with that sweet flat pen. It has a good passive now that can even heal more than others. It is better with crit, it is not that great with kin size, but overall a good choice. And then we have Soul Eater, which still has the benefit of providing you with movement speed when it's stacked, which is especially nice for those hunters that want to go for some more unconventional builds, for example with Heartseeker or whatever, or like generally want to rely on movement speed or skip boots or whatever. I see both working with a Kins build simply because while RC doesn't make as much use of the passive and gets a little less healing, the flat penetration is always great for kin size. At the same time, Soul Eater gets more attack speed, which is even greater for kin size in my opinion. But when it comes down to the choice, it's mostly personal preference now. I personally would probably get RC if I want to go for a crit build, and I would probably stick to Soul Eater if I want to go for a kin size executioner build style. In the end, it's up to you. Obviously, still both can be built, or multiple lifesteal items can be built in general, depending on the situation, depending on how the matchup is overall. I would mostly recommend against it because there's other items you need more, but sometimes it can be worth it. And that's my conclusion of this video. Thank you guys for watching. Sloth out. PS, in case you're wondering, this doesn't actually change anything about the overall builds that I posted before. Just change out Soul Eater with RC if you want to.